Origin Chess Home Reaction. This is Britain's new tank is legitimately insane by the channel Task and Purpose. Yes, on the Task and Purpose video, it's about Britain's tank. I like equipment video, I've said that many times. I've been watching military style videos a lot, and obviously scientific version of it, which is basically equipment, technology. I love that the most. And yeah, I've learned about differences of things in military a lot, because that's the one area I didn't know much about. So when it comes to tanks, there are many different type of tanks. There are also like IFVs and things like that. So I'm guessing this is like main battle tank. Yeah, it's main battle tank, Challenger 3. Britain basically who invented the original tank, which was like, imagine the introduction of the tank basically on the battlefield, right? In World War One. So in World War One, like shit is happening. Suddenly you see this kind of like an armored thing coming towards you. Like, what the fuck is that? This is why I still maintain that World War Two was the most horrible war there is. But World War One was like first things for many things, right? When it comes to like, airplane attack, it wasn't first for that, but many things were pioneered in that, like, machine gun fire through propellers and things like that, which kind of changes the battlefield, kind of. And the tanks, grenades, these were all introduced in the World War One. So just imagine that, right? Like first time experiencing this. So, and also like legitimately insane. This is interesting because one thing I've been noticing, that British Challenger is not considered good compared to something like obviously American Abrams, even the Russians, Armata, things like that, Chinese new T-99, something like that, and even the Korean one, K2 Panther, Black Panther. So the Challenger is considered like inferior to all of them. At least that's the gist you would get if you like hear about a lot of things. But Task and Purpose saying that's legitimately insane. I have a feeling this is gonna explain why Challenger is really good compared to all of them. And kind of makes sense when like British are the one who came up with the tank, so they have to be somewhat good, right? So this is going to be interesting. Let's watch it. Remember, if you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe, so that way you can really help out this channel by helping the algorithm and things, and that way I'll know which type of videos to react to more. So let's watch this one.
The British Army's newest Challenger 3 main battle tank prototypes just rolled off the factory floor and straight into the live fire tests. I want to analyze what new weapons, armor, and technology the tanks bring to the table. How does it plan to breathe new life into the UK's defense manufacturing? And can it still brew tea while slaying the enemy? The first thing we should focus on is the turret, where the majority of the upgrades can be found. We're swapping out the old rifled cannon for a new Rheinmetall-produced Leopard 2 L55A1 smoothbore cannon that came out in 2019, relatively recently. The Challenger 3 will now be able to handle higher pressure ammunition, which is huge because that lets you fire next generation tank munitions like the German DM-11 multi-purpose programmable tank round. The DM-11 allows you to choose between 3 different firing modes on one single shell, perfect for the tanker who hates commitment. After your gunner loads it up, an electronic module then programs the time delay fuse on the round so that it detonates at a very specific point.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, like after World War II, German military thing has gone down, obviously, right? But they haven't stopped innovating, right? Before World War One, Germany was this scientific hub, and they didn't kind of stop there, right? Because even after World War One, where Germany was like completely economy screwed and everything, they still somehow managed to do World War Two. Even after World War Two, they're like, German engineering, that's still a big thing when it comes to cars or literally anything. Apparently, even the ammunition and things like that, they keep hand. German engineers are still insane when you think about it at global scale somehow. Right? You think like after all these things, after all these wars, right? After all the like sanction things and like literally, like curbing what they can do and can't do when it comes to military things, you think that their culture would stop, creating this kind of like scientists and engineers. It didn't. It's just in them, I guess. It's in their blood or something. German engineering is always going to be there.
In the projectile's flight path, you can actually choose the exact coordinates that you want to send hate to. Gunners can quickly set the high explosive round to explode either above, in front, or inside the target after penetrating a wall, for instance. The old version of the Challenger 2's gun had a funky need for 2-piece ammo. It consisted of a charge and then a warhead stored separately inside the hull of the tank, that needed to be combined. But now that they've switched to the NATO standard ammo, it's a single piece. What this means is you get extra room for the rounds to be stored in a separate protected compartment safely tucked away from the crew. There's now the inclusion of a blast door to protect crew from ammunition cook-off. My go-to on this topic of armored vehicles in the UK is the legendary Mr. Nicholas Drummond on Twitter, and he said,
I was about to
quote,
say that, like, that's really important because you hear about that constantly. Like, somehow ammo stockpile got attacked and the whole tank exploded. Obviously, the crew is dead after that. So that is like one of the biggest issue. Like, if tank does get hit, ammo should be like, there should be protective layer to it.
The Challenger 3 fires the DM-73 APFSDS long rod penetrator that can defeat 800 millimeters of RHA steel armor. This is going straight through the other side of your target. Switching cannons out will also help with logistics, because prior to this, the UK ammo was not compatible with other NATO tanks. It's a huge given that in any conventional war the Challenger 3 is set to fight in will undoubtedly involve working in cooperation with its fellow European neighbors. For example, the largest deployment of Challenger tanks currently is 30 in Estonia as part of NATO's Enhanced Forward Presence mission alongside tanks from Denmark. Imagine if you couldn't share ammo with your Denmark buddies. That's not how you build foreign relations. The tank upgrade comes at a time when the British land forces have recently faced high-profile criticisms for
But
their
at the same time, that is so British thing, right? Yeah, you know what? Our ammo is not really compatible to you. You're doing good though. Just like sit down there, chap.
shrinking numbers and funding. The British Ministry of Defence themselves are aware of this lack of love, care, and attention, saying, quote, "The Challenger 3 program will not only deliver a main battle tank, it's also regenerating critical industrial capability in the UK." To that point, the investment is expected to create 650 defence industry jobs across the entire supply chain in the UK domestically. This will also be an investment in future tank manufacturing skills at home, according to the Ministry of Defence. Take a look at the town of Telford in England. It's where the BAE Rheinmetall joint manufacturing plant is located for these tanks. It's also where the unstoppable AFC Telford United is second place in the Southern Central and has won 5 out of the last 5 games of footy ball. The Telford tank plant received £20 million worth of investment for new manufacturing equipment and training for employees. The first batch of 8 prototypes have rolled off the assembly line here for the Challenger 3. But it took a bit of a roller coaster of a ride to get that tank manufacturing plant up and running. The story of the Challenger 3 tank started in 2005 when this UK defence industry white paper said,
"Righto, wouldn't it be a jolly good idea to embark on a capability sustainment program so that our late 1990s era Challenger 2 tanks remain survivable well into the mid-2030s. Sorry, I just wish I had a British accent.
However, the idea remained just a concept thanks to a lack of funding and tunnel vision focus on the counterinsurgency wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. This is until 2014. That's when the Challenger 2 Life Extension Program was officially announced. BAE Systems and
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, when it comes to British accents, right? There's what is a Cockney accent? What is that called? Like those Butch style movies, right? Jason Statham, like, that basically those kind of like British, brawler style video where you hear about this accent, it just like feels weird. But then again, there's something like James Bond style thing. It's like, why there's such a disparity of accents, right? Obviously, they're like different cultures there, but still, those are the two most different thing you can think about, right? Is that third? I don't know. Not in England, I guess, right? Those are the only two I can think of in England, but I don't know.
Rheinmetall from Britain and Germany submitted prototypes to compete against each other, but then they decided competition is a real pain and merged their British operations together. I'm sure they merged for a bunch of reasons, I don't know. By 2020, the requirements for the new tank continued to change. The military leadership and government weren't sure if they wanted a larger 130mm cannon or an auto-loader. Some in the Ministry of Defence were still advocating for buying a foreign tank like the Leopard. It was tough to get everyone on the same dang page. The UK Commons Defence Committee has the job of examining how defense money is spent, and they have a very interesting theory as to what they think went wrong with the tank and why it took so long that I would like to share with you if I may. In 2021, they started, quote, "bureaucratic procrastination, military indecision, financial mismanagement, and general ineptitude had led to the project running £220 million over budget and 7 years behind schedule." General ineptitude is probably my new favorite British insult. Even when they put you down, they sound so classy, I love it. Only 1 week later, either by an extraordinary coincidence or as a direct response, the Secretary of State for Defense Ben Wallace released a plan to Parliament. The plan stated that they were going to invest £1.3 billion into upgrading their old late 1990s era Challenger 2 tanks into Challenger 3 tanks. We finally had a plan. Technically, this isn't an entire new tank. It's an upgrade package to the already existing.
Hey, isn't Challenger 2 from 21st century? I think Challenger 1 is from the 80s or 90s. Challenger 2 was like 21st century thing. How is that so old?
Existing Challenger 2 fleet. However, when you look at the extensive changes that we're about to get into, it might as well be a whole new vehicle. The upgrade comes at a price of about 7.8 million US dollars per tank. So you can buy 288 brand new Toyota Camrys with 50 cals for each. This means that the upgrade package costs roughly the same or slightly more than the original tank itself. There are several factors that go into cost, including relatively small scale of production, economies of scale that we'll get into later, but there's also the cost of next generation technology. Whereas the old Challenger 2 only had a single thermal imager for the gunner, the new turret now has centrally placed independent thermal viewer for the commander. It's those shiny blue things in the top center of the turret right there. Both the commander's sight and gunner's sight are the latest generation Orion thermal sights that are much higher resolution. My understanding is that they're third generation thermal imaging. This new system gives you the ability for hunter-killer engagements, meaning you can have a spotter helping the gunner find those pesky enemy targets. The independent viewer does increase the overall height of the turret. That might sound like a bad thing because you're technically easier to spot, but now you can just expose the viewfinder out over cover to scan for targets rather than the whole turret. All of these visual systems are integrated into a new digital architecture for the tank. Digital architecture is a fancy way of saying how all the digital sensors like the onboard targeting computers, GPS signals, and communications are all interlinked and fed to the crew as they operate. That's right, gents, we'll now be able to brew the most high-tech tea in the vehicle's kettle as it talks to the rest of our weapon systems. It's known as the boiling vessel water heating system. No joke, that seriously exists in British vehicles. It also helps with cooking. Rumor has it, British troops call it the most important piece of equipment in the British armed vehicle because it lets them brew tea. The target fire
I was
control.
about to say tea. I mean, come on, boiling water. That's essential. Everything else can be fine, but you need that one. I've said that many times. Every time I hear about like you can't stop science, you can't stop technology, but still, the more I hear about like defense and let's just say war equipments like tanks and guns getting more and more advanced like that, where they depend on each other, all the technology is somehow connected. In your smartphone, that's great. In your car, that's good. Even in car, I mean, I'm not, but you know, in your everyday life, sure. But something about like survival and things, I don't know, man. Because if one fails, everything fails. That's the problem with electronics, right? It's like if you had a gun, but gun had your like a fingerprint sensor, like phone or something, and it can't use without it. What if that fingerprint sensor malfunctions at the time when you need it? You think like gun works because it's a gun. It's like a knife or something. It just works. It's lethal. But technology might like hinder it, right? Something like, I mean, obviously tank is better because of all this. But all the interconnected things, what if it fails? And unlike everyday life, war things happen in like bad environments, mud, dust and things like that. So I don't know, man. I feel like in future few decades, we're going to hear about electronic malfunctions more than the mechanical one. That's the problem.
Control system has been completely overhauled, so it now integrates automatic target tracking into the fire solution. The old school Challenger 2s operated off a point-to-point bespoke architecture, which didn't share any commonality with the British vehicles or NATO tanks. This new system is called the generic vehicle architecture, not generic in the sense that it's cheaper than a name brand, it's generic in that it's used on any British vehicle and it can work or build commonality with other NATO vehicles due to it being an open.
Yeah, you should have used word like common rather than generic, because perception does matter, right? Whenever somebody is generic, so it must be not that high quality then.
Nature Network package. I cannot overstate how important this system is to the future of NATO war plans. The UK is investing £1.5 billion over the next decade to build a digital backbone to share and exploit large amounts of battlefield data. It's what will allow your tanks to work in the new theory of warfare called multi-domain task force. To put it Barney style for us ground pounders, it lets the tanks talk to and coordinate fires with artillery and aircraft. It simplifies.
Yeah, this is not even something you need to explain. This is the only trend I've been seeing from Americas. Anything happen in America is probably going to leak everywhere else, right? One thing, communicating with each other is like a powerhouse. That's why F-35 exists in the first place, right? One thing to do everything, communicate with each other, right? I even heard people tell me like something like F-35, like 8 or 9 F-35s together would be too overpowered because of this fact. And like that applies to everything. Plane communicating with like like something like I don't know, like some ship or something, right? Destroyer or something, tank, artillery. So it's seamless, it's fast, and information does make a difference. How fast you receive it and process it. So I guess yeah, there is that.
The labyrinth of electronics and displays to increase effectiveness and coordination in a fight. We got a taste of some of this digital system's new practical capabilities during something that we can all understand in a live fire demonstration that showcased it could fire while remotely controlled without crew on board. However, that doesn't exactly explain how it would fire a next shot given the fact that it doesn't have an autoloader. This is like the military equivalent of a party trick, like opening a beer bottle with your teeth or slapping the top of a bottle, forcing you to chug it. Ultimately, afterwards, I'm left with the same feeling of wondering what I'm doing with my life. One of the more labor-intensive jobs handled by the computing system will be the integration of active warning and active protection on the tank. This is the
Yeah, whenever you have that question of what are you doing with your life, your next question should be, why are you even thinking that what are you doing with your life? Life is about doing stupid things, right? People do the greatest thing ever and they feel depressed after that because even that doesn't feel fulfilled to them. So in the end, it's all emotions, right? If you just like do weed, sit on your sofa and watch something, that's fine for you. Anything else you do is not going to be that great compared to that one. It's up to you, right? Having beer party with your friends, if that's great, then that's great. Why does it matter?
LAW system, which stands for Laser Warning System. It's new and it identifies and pinpoints any kind of laser designation of the tank and tells the crew exactly where it's coming from. It's like having a sidekick always watching your back. A vast majority of the anti-tank weapons use some kind of laser designator, such as an AT-14 Cornet from the ground or ones from attack helicopters. They're used so that it guides missiles to the exact point that it's being aimed at. This also includes the laser rangefinders that tanks and other armored vehicles use in order to get an automatic firing solution based on distance and direction. So ELAWS detects that your tank has been painted by an enemy laser designator, and using a bunch of fancy equations written by someone very good at maths, it figures out exactly where that laser is coming from and can automatically traverse the gunner right onto the target. In theory, it could give you the opportunity to shoot first, or at the very least pop smoke and dodge whatever's coming your way. This kind of technology isn't anything new. Russia's been operating the Shatura electro-optical system since the late 1980s, which, if you've ever seen the glowing eyes on a T-90 tank, that's what they are. That said, the ELAWS is significantly more advanced.
Hold up there. So Russia has been using that, but not America? Why did he mention Russia? Implies that they've been using that before anybody else. That's interesting. So T-90s have an advantage like that compared to everybody else.
Now than the late Soviet design. Information from the ELAWS is actually first filtered through a new artificial intelligence program. This program uses the myriad of sensors, passive detecting on the tank, and the commander's gunner sight profile to help identify, classify, and target anything the Challenger 3 crew would want to be unalive. Kill.
Yeah, AI is, whoa, I can pause there.
Kill. The reason this is so...
AI is such a widely used term, like you can't really I'm a fan of Mass Effect trilogy, and only thing I remember from that is like AI is proper AI, like real human like thinking. VI is virtual intelligence, which is like the AI we have of today. But those VI type of thing, let's call it today's AI, has become much more easily accessible. Every single smaller company you can think of has AI customer support or something, which gives you reply based on how you say or how your emotions feel, which is like surprising. And that is like growing really fast, like bacteria out, like grows, right? From 100 to 100,000 to 100 million. I don't know, that's best comparison, but that's how it's becoming, right? Like a year or two ago, you could think something like that didn't exist, and now every single application has some AI version of it or something like that. So AI has really changed things. Even though it's not true intelligence, AI, it's enough of intelligence to matter, let's just say. So AI is really changing everything. AI is so powerful, it can like supplement enough that even if your thing has flaw, whatever it is, whether it's like some technology or something, AI can correct it just by having some kind of a thinking power rather than just some following some script. Some kind of complex thinking power is enough to like fix that hole, which is changing things much faster.
So important is because in modern tank-on-tank fighting, the battle's typically determined by who can shoot first, not who has the better tank. The way tank crews typically prioritize targets is based on proximity, movement, and engagement status. What this means is you essentially want to shoot the stationary tank close to you that's about to fire first, rather than the far away moving one that doesn't know you're there at all. Those seconds correctly prioritizing different targets in a crew member's head could be the difference between life or death. This new AI system eliminates the need for that by prioritizing and outlining targets in order while also identifying targets the crew probably wouldn't have seen, like infantry with thermal camo or remote weapon stations poking out from a ditch. So what problem is that turtle tank in Russia trying to solve? To prevent damage from FPV drones. The Challenger 3 is taking a very different approach to solving the same problem. Most of us have heard about active protection systems before, but there's an interesting reason why the Challenger 3 will now be able to use it. So what limited older tanks from using this was a lack of power output. The new version of the tank has increased electrical power. In terms of bang for your buck, the integration of this APS is significantly cheaper and effective for protecting the tank than completely redesigning the armor and geometry of the Challenger 2. As we've seen in the war in Ukraine, a tank's biggest threats haven't been other tanks, like originally thought, but cheap man-portable anti-tank munitions and FPV drone strikes. Defeating this kind of threat brought about the decision to equip Challenger 3s with Rafael's Trophy Active Protection System, which can intercept and shoot down those incoming munitions. This decision slapped an additional $25.4 million to the total program, but it increased the survivability of the tank. However, this kind of system might limit your availability to hang metal cages around the vehicle because those would get in the way of the interceptor when it fires. Although I've seen some new, sleek, low-profile versions of the cage armor that might be able to accommodate it. All of this technology is housed in the redesigned turret that reports to have greater kinetic and explosive protection than the previous generation,
which had the second generation Chobham armor,
also known as the Joychester armor. This armor has held up well even by today's standards, and it's used by many NATO countries. However, it's decades old at this point. That's why the new Challenger armor will be thicker on the sides and front, and it will be made out of a new type of composite armor called Farnham and Epsom. What are those exactly? Inside the British Ministry of Defence is a group called the Defence Science and Technology Laboratory that developed this new modular armor with BAE and Rheinmetall. Why is it modular? The way it works is the external armor is called Epsom and the internal armor is called Farnham. Challenger 2s had legendary survivability, with stories of them taking dozens of anti-tank rounds in Iraq in a single engagement and still being able to continue fighting. In its entire operational history, it wasn't until September 2023 at the Battle of Robotini in Ukraine that a Challenger 2 was lost to direct enemy fire from a Russian anti-tank guided missile. According to an article written by David Axe for Forbes, the Ukrainian crew bailed out and the ammo cooked off, destroying the tank. The 14 remaining Challenger 2 tanks are now used in stationary gun positions, almost like artillery, where they lob high explosive shots about 2 miles away at Russian trench positions. This strategy isn't great for the Challenger though, because the old rifled barrels reportedly wore out after about 500 rounds instead of the 1500 that the more modern cannons can handle. The suspension has also seen an overhaul with
Hold up there. So this AI thing the Challenger 3 has now, or this Challenger 3, right? Challenger 3 has right now the AI detection and AI aid of like detecting things in advance and like anti-missile thing, whatever that defense system is. There's other tanks out there like Leopard or K2 from Korea, new Abrams version or something. Because if they don't, like, this is the first one to kind of use it, that would be really overpowering, right? I don't know why people assume Challenger is not good compared to those German, like Korean ones and Chinese one. So far, everything I've heard is like, these challenges are insane, right? Especially the places that they have strength at, right? Even the Challenger 2 was great at some points like that, so I don't know.
third generation hydro-gas system. What's a hydro-gas system? We usually point the finger at Germany for over-engineering their tanks, but the hydro-gas suspension system is only really used by the British. It's a uniquely complicated way to engineer your tank. Most modern tanks use torsion bar suspension going back to even World War II.
I mean, look at Range Rover. They know their suspension, right? Range Rover was so insane for near 20 plus years now. There have been video of people actually showing like putting their glass there in really rough terrain and just like gliding through off-roading and just like glass without spilling over. That's insane, right? They use some gas type thing in Range Rovers, right? Even the newer Range Rovers have like monocoque chassis now, which is insane for an off-roader. So British know how to do this.
Challenger tanks use the more mechanically complex hydro-gas or hydro-pneumatic suspension for your engineer types because it gives the crew better stability for firing on the move. These do, however, add the overall vehicle maintenance requirements and cost, adding to those among other downsides, but does play into the UK's focus on weapon accuracy above everything else. It makes me wonder what kind of space-age suspension the Challenger 4 will have. There's some point of contention in the open source intelligence community surrounding the engine. Some believe that the engine is the same as its predecessor, the Perkins twin-turbocharged direct injection diesel engine that gives 1,200 horsepower total. Others claim that it's a whole new engine upgrade called the CV12-9A, which gives it improved power output and engine cooling. One of the downsides mentioned by the Ukrainian Challenger 2 crew is that the tank has trouble with its 1,200 horsepower engine to handle the 71-ton vehicle, so it gets stuck in the mud in Ukraine's soft terrain throughout the year. This forces them to use engineering vehicles to recover it, so the same horsepower engine might have trouble handling the heavier Challenger 3 tank. Tank expert and friend of the show, Nicholas Drummond on Twitter also said that this was one of the things he would change about the Challenger, suggesting an MT883 Euro power pack with 1650 horsepower instead would handle the increase of the weight, which is said to be a couple of tons heavier.
Okay, what I don't understand, like, why are we talking about horsepowers, right? Like, I don't understand that. Like, aren't we supposed to talk about torque? Horsepowers are kind of different. They're like, torque kind of translates to horsepower, but seeing the figure in horsepower when you're talking about like something that lugs weight around, it should be talked in torque rather than horsepower, right? I don't know.
So the open source numbers disagree, but it sounds like this new thing might be close to 75 tons or more. That's a chonky girl. The new engine is going to reduce the heat signature that it gives off to other tanks. From what I can tell, the transmission is largely the same, with 6 gears forward and 2 in reverse. The inclusion of the 2 reverse gears gives it about 25 miles per hour top speed going backwards, which is a useful feature on the Challenger given the NATO style of fighting tanks by peeking out to cover and then fire, then quickly ducking back into it. The upgrade in total will add a full ton.
What surprised me, why are they not going through like Abrams style, turbine style engine, right? Again, my point of torque, that's what turbines do, right? They produces torque really low end, instant torque. That's why turbos and even superchargers kind of work. But turbine type engines would have low end torque. That's the whole point of Abrams and why it can be so heavy and fat. So why not use something like that?
At least to the overall weight, bringing it up to possibly between 72 pounds or so. But according to Ministry of Defense releases, it will not affect the top speed of the vehicle, which will be able to move at about 59 kilometers per hour on improved surfaces. This is an important point, given that the Challenger 2s are one of, if not the slowest tanks fielded by NATO. For reference, the Abrams and Leclerc top out at about 45 miles per hour, and the German Leopards are 42 miles per hour, according to open source numbers, although actual capabilities when you want to floor it is going to be a little bit faster. Sometimes you can eke out higher numbers at the cost of running your systems into the ground. And if you're going to run it into the ground, there aren't that many systems to spare, because the British Army currently has 221 of the Challenger tanks, of which 148 will be lucky enough to receive the overhaul, and the remaining will be retired. Feeding old tank husks through the production line to upgrade them is something that the US Army does when they create their newest M1A2 SEP version 3. Unlike aircraft, which are always brand new usually, tanks are usually modified from old husks. This will be enough to give them the ability to generate 2 heavy brigade combat teams though. Now, why does the British Army only have 221 main battle tanks when they have a population of about 68 million, and Poland, with a population less at 41 million, is planning to have 1,300 tanks?
68 million? Oh yeah, something like that. Wait a minute, wasn't that more? Why do I remember British having more population? Wait a minute. Yeah, it is 68 million. Yeah. So yeah, that is such a small number compared to like USA, Russia, and things like that, who like crosses thousands basically. Even India has thousands of tanks, right? I'm pretty sure. So that's really small number compared to that.
Tanks. There are several factors going into that, including underfunding of armored vehicle procurement over the past 20 years, and budget cuts. They only invested, I believe, about $3 billion into armored vehicle acquisition and procurement. But that doesn't really explain all of it, because the British military is the 6th largest spender on defense in the world, spending $74.9 billion on defense annually. Another factor, for the limited number of tanks, is NATO's high-level vision of how their partners should cooperate and coordinate. NATO's strategic concept document explains each member contributes a different piece to the puzzle and that they are best suited to contribute. The British government has agreed that their role in the alliance is to focus on investing in space, drones, cyber, and nuclear warfare. They outline this in their Integrated Operating Concept document and in their 2020 Integrated Review of Security document, where they state at their government's highest levels that this piece of the puzzle for them is to invest in cyber and space warfare. The British military's contribution to NATO is focused more on naval and air force. There are also geographic considerations. The UK is an island nation, so the threat of a land invasion is very small. If Britain needed tanks tomorrow for some reason, the US has an arsenal of over 8,000 that they could refurbish for them. It's up for debate whether this is a good idea, if it's a gamble, to delegate different capabilities within an alliance. It's kind of like a really high-stakes version of the trust fall. You really have to trust your security partners to catch you. Challenger 3 formations are going to be organized to focus on small teams of troops sent all over the world to train and assist partner nations.
In the end, it boils down to geopolitics, right? You must have better geopolitics in your favor in order for the system to work. Because in the end, we've seen like NATO's Article 5. Yeah, it's just like it suggests there should be a response of any kind. Doesn't have to be military response. So this kind of like everybody should be piece of the puzzle. It's efficient. But if you don't have like a monopoly over your side where people have to help you, you might get screwed. Who knows?
With the focus of conflict prevention. This falls in line with the push for the new British tanks to have better commonality with their other NATO tanks. So while the number of troops is going down, the money spent on each is going up. Batches of the original Challenger 2 tanks will be rotated in for upgrades to Teleford. The first 8 tanks are still considered prototype models. The 140 yet to be upgraded are not expected to be in full service until 2027 at least, and all tanks fully integrated will be back into formations by 2030. This is happening as the British Army is cutting its number of troops to just 75,000 personnel in an effort to slim down the force and focus on smaller but better trained and capable soldiers. Similarly, their tank formations are being reduced from 227 down to 148 total Challenger 3s. It's expected that Challenger 3s will be in service until at least 2040 and beyond, almost 60 years after the first models of the Challengers rolled off the production line. But, like the ship of Theseus, if you replace all tank parts, is it still really the same tank from 60 years ago? The British Army has the longest history of any nation when it comes to operating tanks. They were the first to deploy them in 1916 at the Battle of Somme, and they've used tanks in every conflict since then. History suggests main battle tanks will be important even as the nation's security goals might change over time. Tank warfare is rapidly evolving by the day in Ukraine, and potential threats are growing in all corners of the world. It seems like the Brits are hedging their bets that the Challenger 3 will be up to the job. But what do you think? Is their strategy wrong? Should they be investing in less in nuclear and space and more in ground warfare and tanks? I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy. Let me know in the comments section.
Look, even if they do suddenly change, it's not gonna matter now because they can't just suddenly become powerful in those areas, can they? So what they're doing is makes sense, I guess. And yeah, piece of the puzzle thing, Britain having like, having good geopolitics in their side, like being important enough that people like something like USA will probably help them out if somehow war finds their doorstep, which probably won't, right? I'm pretty sure Europe will be like at major war before Britain is threatened or something. That's how it's conveniently located in that place, right? Before anything can attack Britain, it will attack many other places. So global war would start anything before that. So yeah, I think their strategy is fine. It makes sense. Piece of the puzzle type of thing. NATO works efficient that way. And then you have America. So there you go. America's basically everything, right? Tanks, yeah, we have 8,000 of them. Planes, we have a lot of them as well. Satellites, nukes, we have everything. There you go. Right, well, that was Britain's new tank. Is legitimately insane. Yeah, it's really good technologically wise. AI and everything's really good. This was our channel, Task and Purpose. If you like my reaction, subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you next time.